shows, the AusBiz COB is the key stuff you need to know about the day in business and finance.
Hi there, welcome to the COB. I'm Nadine Blaney, and it's wonderful to be here with you on the 14th of July, halfway through July already into this new financial year, on the cusp of reporting season. It's all happening as well as on the tariff front. So that obviously has been a big driver of conversation today, will continue to be so. A little bit of sense of uneasiness over the shifting sands that is the U.S. approach to trade and tariffs. U.S. President Donald Trump really did put the focus on Europe over the weekend with fresh tariff announcements. Still, though, saying that it's open for negotiation, so 30% levy on imports from Mexico and the EU effective August the 1st, 35% for goods coming from Canada outside of the USMCA pact that was already signed. But it's just uncertain, right? Because still saying that there's room for negotiation before that August 1st deadline. Today, just a very flat session. We still do have the last of the day's trades going through on the S&P ASX 200. So we'll revisit that in just a moment. And we had plenty of conversation today that did include tariff and trade ties as well, because we had some import-export data coming from China. Now, of course, we did see a slowdown coming through in terms of the import-export data in the immediate wake of so-called Liberation Day being declared by the U.S. president. But today we did learn that we're seeing, a bit of a pickup. Exports are picking up as we've got this tariff deadline between the U.S. and China looming. So it was a bit of a market malaise today, setting in not only with what happened here locally, but also with U.S. futures being under pressure and European futures as well. Look, it's a pretty quiet night tonight, but we are looking forward to getting some consumer price inflation data in the United States tomorrow. So, of course, this is all tied in with this notion that we're seeing trade barriers being erected, and that will no doubt have to be paid for by someone. All right, let's get across some of the major sectors. We did have our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, in China today, accompanied by Australian presidents of BHP and Rio Tinto. Fortescue, Andrew Forrest was also there, spruiking Australia's goods to China. Really difficult balancing act the Prime Minister has to achieve while there. South 32, we'll cover that one in corporate news, down by close to 5%, finishing at $2.96. And today I had the pleasure of hosting The Call with Gaurav Sodhi from Intelligent Investor and Nathan Samsundam from Deep Data Analytics. And we had a company come up called Red Hill. Now, I wasn't overly familiar with it, but it was interesting, and I bring it up now because both of my guests mentioned mineral resources in that context, and I don't mind giving it away, but Nathan actually said that mineral resources would be a better risk-reward equation than Red Hill. You'll want to check out that episode of The Call. Really great information contained in there. And one double buy from the pair, which doesn't happen all that often when we've got Gaurav and Nathan on the desk. All right, gold, check in on that sector, see how we're performing. Newmont up by 1.5%. Of course, gold is pulling focus once again with the tariff uncertainty. Northern Star up by 2.25% to $16.56. What other sectors do we have? Well, we'll continue to take a look at how those sectors performed when my expert guest joins me in just a tick. Let me get you across the corporate stories, though. In Macquarie Technology jumped on a land acquisition for a data center campus. Henson Technologies revised up its full-year underlying earnings forecast to come in between $110 million and $112 million. Share price rocketing off the back of that. Abacus Storage King also rocketing on a sweetened buyout bid. And there's South 32, look, didn't put it in there, but drops the most in 3 months on that Mozambique smelter impairment. Kingsgate consolidated, hitting a near 12-year high on a rise in quarterly production. Victory Metals rose on clearing a vetting step for U.S. federal U.S. contracts. Bowen Coking Coal hit a record low on reduced coal output at its Queensland mine. Compumetics jumped on record full-year sales. Osteopor rose after getting market approval in Switzerland. Check that out, up by 55%. Small price tag, though, at 2 cents per share. And AMP in broker moves climbed to a near 6-month high after Citi lifted its price target on the stock. Let's not keep you in suspense any longer. A big warm welcome to the COB, Josh Gilbert from eToro. Josh, bit of a lackluster session out there, to be expected, I would imagine.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning. I don't know. That shows you everything you know about the lackluster session. Happy Monday, I probably should say.
Yeah.
No, it was a bit of a lackluster session. Not really sort of too much happening. Again, lots of conversation around what we're going to expect from the tariff situation with Trump. Feels like he's sort of looking to strong arm nations once again with those tariffs sort of coming through. You were sort of mentioning at the top of the episode there, that uncertainty coming back to the fore, and I think that might be something that we see throughout the week. But as we've seen from Trump, I think the market is ultimately betting on the fact that we've seen him play his hand before and sort of pull back and actually roll back those tariffs. So it really feels like a very simple play of trying to strong arm those nations to negotiate and come to the table. So I think markets are, as I say, taking it in their stride for the time being. Futures down a little bit today, but I don't think anything crazy that's going to rock this market at the moment.
Yeah, we've got Euro Stoxx futures down, DAX futures, FTSE futures, as well as the US futures, to your point. You know what's not doing too poorly? Bitcoin. What the heck? Continues to rocket higher. So why is Bitcoin seemingly immune to some of the nerves that are being exposed around tariffs and trade?
Yeah, look, I mean, Bitcoin has continued to move with just huge momentum so far, this year, and it's kind of really shrugging off a lot of what we're seeing maybe from, that weakness side or that uncertainty side, I think. But obviously, we do have markets sat at record highs. But what we are seeing is we're seeing huge ETF inflows for Bitcoin at the moment, and that's really driving this sort of market momentum. I think what we're really seeing and the pace of gains that we're really getting from Bitcoin in recent weeks and so far this year, I think it really reflects for me not just growing demand, but also I think the growing maturity of Bitcoin as an asset class as well. I think we're really seeing sustained interest, and that is supported by, as I say, these sort of structural inflows that we are seeing into, the ETFs at the moment. I think we're really moving away from that sort of short-term speculation to sort of longer-term positioning for, not just retail investors, but also I think that the big shift for me of what's changing is who's buying, and that is that institutional adoption that we are seeing. And I think it's the first real bull market where institutional participation is front and center. Of course, retail is always there, but I do still think we've got a lot, a long way to go in terms of retail allocation to crypto assets. And I think that gives us another tailwind long into the future. But I think we are still very, very early on in terms of, retail adoption. We've had Bitcoin on our platform at eToro since 2013, and a recent survey that we ran showed us that 64% of retail investors still don't own crypto in their portfolio. So given that we're starting to see these huge wealth managers, talking to their clients about allocating small portions of Bitcoin to their portfolios, for us, that opens up a huge opportunity. And I think that the continued institutional allocation, I think that feels inevitable, especially with, sort of an improving regulatory environment that we do have, under Trump as well. I think that's going to serve as a tailwind, and we're going to continue to see, retail allocate to this asset over the years ahead.
Right. You know what else has been a really strong theme, as you well know? Defense. So Drone Shield today, rocketing higher yet again locally. But really that Pentagon investment into that publicly listed MP, materials operation last week, really did light a rocket under the likes of, Linus and all the rest. I mean, do you have to, as an Aussie investor, look overseas to gain exposure to that defense thematic, or is there enough here to keep us interested?
I think Europe is obviously probably that sort of dominant sector really for defence right now, and we've seen from the performance this year from some of the names over there, really obviously strong performance. I think that is where Europe really has sort of dominated, and one of the reasons why European markets have performed so well this year. Again, you mentioned Drone Shield. There are obviously a few other names here locally giving that sort of defensive appeal. Linus obviously has had a great year, jumping on the back of that MP Materials deal as well. So, look, I think from a geographical perspective in terms of allocation, if you're looking at that defence sector, I think it's wise to sort of look overseas. Of course, locally, there are some names that have performed really well this year, but unfortunately, we don't have, a huge allocation to those sectors, and we do tend to see, companies, if they want to list, tend to move overseas for, whether that is in the US markets, whether that is, in Europe. So I certainly think if you want that broader exposure to defence, you're probably going to be looking to Europe right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. Now, another thing that we're really keen to get a read on is obviously the quarterly earnings that are coming from the States beginning this week. What will you be paying attention to?
Yeah, so we've obviously got, US banks coming through. That's sort of going to be something we're keeping a close eye on. I think really going to be looking at some of those investment banks, given that, the period of reporting is going to be around what we saw through Liberation Day, through April, through those tariff announcements. So we're probably likely seeing sort of record trading days, I think, from some of those firms as well. So if we think about Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, those types of names, probably going to see some strong performance from the equity sector. I think it will give us a good read on the indicator of consumer health as well. That's going to be really important for us. So, if we're looking at like delinquencies, credit cards, those types of things, always going to be really important from an economic standpoint as well. And also it will be, what are lenders doing in terms of, are they sort of setting aside cash piles to potentially, fear for losses in the future? So are we going to see those sort of reserves built? That will be, I think, really key for us. And then one of the big sort of tech names coming through is Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
What a year and what a 12 months it's had. Obviously, just recently launched the second or sort of the second half of it, the third series of Squid Games. One of the best performing, series ever. I think it just goes to show how well Netflix has done from a period where it sort of stagnated after a great, period during COVID. Then we had a bit of a lull coming through. And I think it just goes to show that sort of global touch that it has, but also then that local appeal at the same time as well. So I think it had more than 60 million viewers in the first 3 days on Squid Game. So although that probably won't show up in these results, it will be something that we look to in terms of guidance for the second quarter. But they've moved heavily into sports as well. They've obviously got those ad-supported tiers that have coming through. So I think that will be really key in terms of we're now focusing on revenue. We're not focusing so much on subscriber numbers. But I think that revenue growth will be really, really positive given what we've heard from, pick up for the ad-supported tiers and also what we're seeing in sports as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, we have got a lot to look forward to. Look, Josh, thanks for getting us across it all. I hope you have a good evening.
It's a pleasure. Thanks very much, Nadine. Take care.
Josh Gilbert there joining us from eToro. Look, let's just rewind for a moment, get a closer look at the stock of the day. Macquarie Technology Group, MAQ is the ticker code. Gaurav Sodhi and Nathan Somasundaram.
I'm happy for them to expand. As a shareholder myself, I'm glad that they're looking elsewhere, and I'm happy to back management into further expansion because although I'm cautious about NextDC's expansion, which I think borders on kind of reckless. This one is much more carefully considered, and it shows the difference when you have owners who own 50% of the equity versus good management for NextDC, but probably different style of incentives.
Mm-hmm. So that's a buy for you?
Buy for me, yeah. This is actually, it's at a good price at the moment. I think the valuation at the moment is particularly compelling. So yeah, it's a good opportunity to buy.
So I am a fan. I'm actually, today's update is worth looking at. So I am going to be going home and looking at it. I think it's a buy. I think it's an interesting stock. Pity if this came out a week ago, I probably would have looked at this one. But right now, yeah, I think the next update for us, this will be definitely be looked at. I think it's a pretty good play.
told you they agreed on something, and that was to buy Macquarie Telecom, really liking their expansion plans. And Gaurav, if you listen to the extended version, does give what sets, in his view, Macquarie apart from the likes of NextDC and some of the other data center builders and operators. And you can find the extended stock of the day on our website, ausbiz.com.au, or you could go to our YouTube channel. All right, let's take a look at some of the leaders today. Look no further than our stock of the day, Macquarie Technology. It is up by 9.6% to $67.88. Clarity up by close to 9% as well. And you can see there a few of the lithium miners on there as well. Nickel Industries up by 4% to 77 cents per share. Now let's take a look at some of the laggards to see what, at least in percentage terms, proved to be a weight on the market overall. Lifestyle communities still being punished by investors in the wake of that ruling against it in Victoria. South 32, we already detailed that. SiteMinder is off significantly. It has had its target price cut 2.3% to $6.45 per share by Citi. Citi, is pointing to its rising headcount, which is a positive signal for its revenue growth outlook, but also indicates increased growth in operating expenses coming through in FY26. Block, we had JP Morgan saying that it's going to start trying to make the likes of Block and Zip pay for some of its consumer data, and that has sent the shares lower. James Hardie as well is off by close to 4%. All right, in the small to mid-cap space, Unico Silver. Well, look at all of these silver. Anything with silver in its name looks to do pretty well today. Watching the price of silver very closely, flipping the page to some of those that did lag the market, and Alterity Therapeutics and Amplia Therapeutics, as well as Botanix Pharma. It is a very quiet night tonight. Honestly, nothing much happening overnight, so it will be very much dictated by trade headlines. Tomorrow, though, here we get the monthly consumer confidence report, along with overseas arrivals and departure data. We also get a data dump coming from China that includes GDP, retail sales, along with the U.S. Consumer Price Index for June and the U.S. Empire State Manufacturing Index. So look, as we watch the European Open and watch Asian markets come to a close, the S&P ASX 200 has finished just mildly negative, down by about 0.1%. It's just the uncertainty around trade headlines, U.S. futures trending lower, and as we look toward Asian markets, some positivity in mainland China. Look, there is so much great content online. I had a number of really good interviews today as well. We took a look at some of the companies and sectors with ECP Asset Management, Andrew Dale. That's up there if you'd like to take a look at some stock specifics. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletters. If you don't get our COB newsletter, you are really missing out. Go to ausbiz.co/newsletters. I hope you have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow morning.